Hi, welcome to Monetizing Innovation. I'm John Holcomb. Innovation isn't just the big idea on the whiteboard. It's the hard decisions, the missed signals, and the leaders who keep moving forward anyway. This show dives into real stories behind breakthroughs in life sciences, healthcare, and tech, how ideas become results, and how teams align under pressure, and how strategy turns into execution. If you're looking to build something bold, you're in the right place. Press play and let's turn innovation into impact. Welcome to today's show. We've joined by Dionne Wilson, founder of Rastr Technologies. He's a trailblazer in the Web3 solutions for the media and entertainment industry. Dionne is shaping the future of digital media, blending blockchain, cloud-based tools, and AI to empower independent creators and publishers. In addition to leading Rastr, he's a dynamic keynote speaker and a visionary technologist dedicated to rethinking how media gets produced, distributed, and monetized. Tune in to hear his journey, what Web3 for entertainment truly means, and how innovation can uplift creators globally. Dionne, thank you so much again for joining us today. I can't thank you enough for your time. I know the audience is in for a great treat, especially with your background. And if you would, maybe you could just share a little bit about, what you do at Rastr and, some of the things that you're doing to really get this off the ground.
Absolutely. And thank you, John, for having me on the show. So Rastr really came into its own as a result of wanting to solve problems from a previous entrepreneurial environment I was in. I was a publisher of comic books, and I had the honor and the pleasure of working with a number of creators around the world and getting to know them, even the ones that, didn't work directly with me, just getting to know them and understand them. And as the company matured, I began to see that there's already a lot of great content out there. And we had made some strides in technology, kind of introducing some fringe technology such as blockchain into the environment. Or, I say using it, so a semi-introduction. People knew about it, but we were some of the first to use it. And from that point, it was really about pivoting towards solutions. It's really about how can we, after you see, some patterns, some common problems that creators are having, how can you use software technology and business models to improve the creators' lives? So long story short, we decided to really do a lot of interviews, do a lot of surveys, and really see what the creators, what was happening in the space, how the creators thought about it. And from there, we created Rastr and created Hero Ledger and Comic Chain.
It's so exciting. You were kind enough to give me a quick tour of sort of the software platforms and sort of the entire business model. I have to admit, it was truly impressive to see about not just thinking through with the interviews that you did, but how you converted that into an entire ecosystem that can truly disrupt how the industry operates today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you speak a little bit more to some of the challenges that you did, especially because I'm sure it started off with a lot of the interviews. Could you share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. So originally transitioning away from comic publishing, I had to essentially find a new type of team. And this team would be made up of people who had another kind of technical knowledge, which is software coding and programming. And that's where I met Sam Benton, who is the co-founder and chief technology officer, who really helped to shape really a very rough idea into a formula that the developers that we would take on would be able to turn into a product. As we tinkered with that one product, I should say two applications, that's Comic Chain Hero Ledger, we began to really think about how other creators, such as costume designers, costume performers, what we know as cosplay, independent game developers and creators, tabletop as well as mobile, electronic, as well as animators, really are visual narrative producers. And we saw a number of similarities that we could tailor our solutions around not just our comic our peers of comics, but also tailor around the other independent creators. Now, one thing we recognized, and Sam is a lot smarter than I am with this, is that you can't ham fist all of the features and all of the solutions into one application. One of the things that I've said over the years is the four major similarities that these creators share is the inability to monetize, at least to a commercial level, right? Where they can
Right.
sustain themselves 100% in their endeavor. Most cannot. Obviously, there's the need for information, what you know about your fans, your buyers, what you know about the vertical you're in, what you know about the industry. So information. And there are bodies of knowledge out there. What I saw, speaking towards the data or the insight side, is that the information kind of seemed to go in the same loop of always focusing on which comics sold, unit economics, as opposed to other metrics that are key to any small, medium, or large business growing its market share, growing its base. So we said we need to get them new insights, kind of not new in the sense that, we created, but new insights in terms of information they had not been familiar with and had not really been broadcast into the industries, those various industries, I would say in the best way possible. And of course, there's collaboration. As we collected data, as we talked to creators, we found out there's just a tremendous amount of value that they create and sustain. But that value, almost like, someone with a heart condition, it just doesn't have the circulation that it should. And then next, of course, is brand recognition. We all can name the big characters, big commercial brands. But the little guys, which number 10,000 plus creatives, and I don't just mean individuals, I mean studios and businesses. Very few people who are outside the space can name them. And someone might ask, well, why is that important? Businesses get further by not only creating opportunities, but looking for opportunities created by others. And we can show value in certain spaces that businesses, maybe larger businesses, medium and larger businesses haven't navigated. Then we can really, that becomes at least the first stage of incentive to get them to say, well, what's going on over here with, ABC Comic Studio? What can we do here? You know, and so that was really our premise. Those were four major spaces where collaboration, information, and recognition and monetization were very important to us. And we knew that, again, we couldn't ham fist it. We'd have to design products that looked at various stages of the creator's life cycle. And not only the creator's life cycle, but the product too.
And it's probably worth noting, right, especially for folks that maybe are not as tied into this industry space, it's very IP heavy, very trademark, copyright heavy. So that's a challenge, right, for the artists that you recognized in terms of these studios as well, and how to do that. Could you share a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. So one thing that's happening constantly, we call them creators, and that's what's actually happening. There's a tremendous amount of writing, illustrating, and other graphic design, pattern making, sewing. There's a lot going on. And this is happening every day. And what we also noticed as a pattern, the further the creator, even in the indie space, has gone, the higher the frequency of creations from them compared to their peers who aren't as far. And so when you look at the process, which is not too difficult, but there's some friction, and you look at the cost when it pertains to the US Copyright Office, there's going to be a tremendous amount of expense for these creators, for these independent creators in a day's time, in a week's time, in a year's time. We looked at it and we said, one of the first steps to value is protection. I come from a security background. When things are secure, we can take those things to the next level, right? And so we said, what can we do? And so I began to understand that we could help to register and attest. And our next leg, which I'm very excited about as we complete the framework, is to really have the relationships with the USPTO, US Patent Trade Office, and the US Copyright Office to get them to see our blockchain technology, our registration technology, and security technology as a support to what they do. We want creators to pay the taxes, and they want to. We want creators to get all the necessary protections they need, and they want to. They're very, very concerned about this, and especially in a time of graphic designs that are coming to us by uh, you know Chat GPT and other programs that are out there.
No, I think that's such a wonderful point that you make, and I think that protection as well is so critical, and that also, to your point, you're helping them monetize their work, but also not just monetize it, but actually make sure they're getting their full value that they're owed for that work.
Absolutely.
Uh, Um, I think that's just a wonderful example. I think too, just where you look at you identified the need, you rapidly worked through some of that, and now that's the first sort of platform or leg, right, of some of the work that you guys are offering. Now you have even more though that you're working. Could you share a little bit more about then how that process follows from there?
Sure. So, when we talk about if you really mean the other applications and where they go, when we talk about this ecosystem that we refer to as multiverse, we're really talking about a very specific set of applications that aren't random. We're talking about applications which literally focus on the creator at multiple stages across their life cycle. And again, the life cycle of the product. What we've seen, your initial creators are new to the market and they're still looking for their tribe. They're still, figuring out where they want to go, what they want to do. And part of that is providing the first steps for them, which is let's protect what you have. Let's get a level of protection on it. And then let's begin to see what kind of values it has. And that's where the marketplace within Hero Ledger falls in. And then next, of course, we have a collaborative tool, which as you're navigating where you want to be professionally, who you want to work with, what you want to do, you now have a centralized location to manage projects with your team. And we know that management is communication, it's layout, it's time to market, it's timing. And so we've created tools and it's payment. It's payment. So we created another tool where those necessities can be managed. And we subscribe as best as possible where we can to distributed ledger quality attributes. And one of them is the idea of trustless. How can we pay our team without one person needing to be responsible for the purse in a way that they might harm the team? Maybe they don't mean to, but they do. They make a bad financial decision. When you have automated systems to assist with this, everybody's getting their cut. And again, we talk about the tax aspect. You're able to forward your taxes too. You can, through our system, we have a tax wallet. You assign, what your estimate is and have it ready. Shy of being able to just click a button and send it directly to the IRS with the documents, which we want to look at that in the future. We want to make the business process frictionless for these creators. We understand that at first and second tiers, and even sometimes at higher tiers, that they don't have the business acumen. They want to do the right thing. They're making the best decisions they know how. And some are making some phenomenal decisions. I don't want to take anything away from them. But we do find a lot who are confused and scratching their head as to, I know what I want to do, but how do I structure this around the business? So we decided to build in a lot of business logic. And then the next tool is allowing the aftermarket when the product is, you know, when it's gone through that retail phase, allowing the aftermarket to determine aftermarket values. And what are we talking about? We're talking about what the collectors do with that same product. And one of the gaps that we kind of see, unless you're a creator and you have, an auction house has a special auction for your work, you may not benefit financially when it's in the secondary market. It's beyond your reach at that point. But we found ways that the creators of these works can still benefit financially as investors benefit from the secondary market values. And so we have a tool for that too. We have a tool that essentially helps them to manage all of their relationships, all of their documentation. It is an ecosystem. There has been no other ecosystem except the traditional environment. And that's one where a lot of creators have had to wait until an innovator came forward with something. And then if the innovator came forward with it, it had to match what that creator needed. If it didn't match and it was, just for the illustrators and not for the writers, then you don't get that level of, you don't get that step up you need.
Right.
And we just decided to look at everybody. And we decided to look at, sunrise and sunset on the product and on the creator. And we take very serious the idea of, life cycle extension, what that means on so many levels, and specifically the four levels that I spoke of earlier. So we tooled out the original Hero Ledger to make sure that it could register assets. That was a big thing. And the store was big too, because we wanted a place where creators who were not using what they had, not making any money on it, and it's just sitting around, where they could say, let me put this thing on Hero Ledger, let me put it in marketplace and, see what happens. And while that's happening, that's the sales side and the license side. We wanted the licensor, rather, we wanted to say, hey, we've got to go out here and talk to the other side. We've got to bring the buy side in, because the buy side has another problem. They have time, cost, and, resource constraints. And we really believe that a lot of the unused assets can go to reduce those constraints on the buy side. And so that was a really great match for us. And that's where we started. And we said, hey, we can do some things in fintech. We can do some other things that is going to support this environment. And that's where the other applications come.
And I think it's so powerful, especially just the journey you went on, right? It's almost like a real life case study of lean startup,
Thank
really going through the basics of understanding what were the problems or the jobs to be done, right? And there was actually, depending on who you talked in the ecosystem, different challenges that you had to face.
Yes.
You know, as you reflect on that journey and some of the lessons you learned, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had from both a leadership as well as just even kind of getting the initial concept off the ground?
Okay, that is a brilliant question. I know we probably shouldn't say, oh, that's a great question, but it really is. We've had our share of friction in getting the idea off the ground. Anytime there is a new paradigm that requires or is trying to shift the old, it takes a lot for people to see it. It takes a lot. People have to be able to understand where they're going. They know where they've been. They know where people have been before them, but where are we going? Where are you taking us? And so we've had to really master language and visuals, very much like what you do when you put together a comic book, a game, or cosplay, or, or animation. We've had to really master the narrative and the visuals so that creators could have the right ideas about where we're taking them, what this world means. And I think that the conversations we've had have been very effective. So, what's been difficult, not only do creators have to be able to see this, investors have to be able to see it, business partners, people, brands that, organizations that you want to be your brand partners, they have to see it. We've been very fortunate that we've had brand partners that saw, our early works and they said, wow, we want in on this. Investors, because of the cycles and really the ocean of venture capital, even angel investing, private equity, when it comes to software solutions, during our time, there was so much sensation and hype around, the ride hailing services, the groups, and it's still ride hailing to a degree, but the groups that would, deliver your food and, deliver your packages or whatever. That, one of the things we heard a lot from more commentary, not necessarily directed at us, but, that a lot of investors were looking for another Facebook. They were looking for the next Facebook, I should say, right? And we just weren't that. We weren't that. So the difficulty is really in the beginning was communicating the vision to the developers. And in the very beginning, it wasn't as difficult with the developers because the developers were really chasing after how hot the distributed ledger and SaaS environment was becoming. So they were dying to get on a project so they could say, hey, I've got this on my resume. Now I want to shift to Microsoft or, whoever else. So that wasn't as difficult, but still, when it came to talking to them about what they would be coding and how it would look, there were a few instances where the product kept shifting towards products that were already in the market. We were like, not quite, not quite. The user friendliness, the beauty of design, but not the features and functions just like that. So, really the vision, really communicate the vision, finding the right words. And those words are going to be different for each person, not just each sector. And that's a lot of mastery. So what we did, we decided that we would just turn internal and finance ourselves, as I've done with all my businesses, and just build the system that we knew the information the creators were really describing. So those were the most difficult challenges in the beginning. As we move forward, I would say that it's not as difficult. I'm one where, in my mind, it happened 20 years ago, and it's just you know making sure we dot all the I's, cross all the T's. Not in a way where it's analysis paralysis, but it is safe. We are talking about moving money, and we are talking about protecting people's intellectual property, and we have to do that accurately. We have to do it right. So, we test, we go back and test, and we're just lucky that agentic tools were really meeting us at a point that I'd say we needed them. And they help to really act as a force multiplier. And this doesn't take away the brilliance and the need of software developers. It complements it quite well.
No, absolutely. And a couple things that, as you said there, kind of came to mind that I think were really kind of critical too, right? Is that in the front end, you recognize and took your experience, right, from the different industries, the different companies that you've been in, and actually applied a lot of like, hey, we already know that there's some of the capabilities here. Now I'm going to apply it and understand what the market problem is. But then I think you also highlighted, while it was important to be flexible there, you reached a certain point where it's like, okay, we got to lock down because we can't scale the chaos, right, of that exploratory work.
Absolutely.
And security now is paramount. So there's not the room for error.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you comment on that? Because I know not many people can handle that like transition, right, from the creative front end to then here's the structured that world we were going to have to operate in.
Sure. That's a great question too, because I would say we evolved there looking at other businesses. One of the things that I've made it a habit to do is to pay attention to what's happening in the business world, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and listen to the business thought leaders out there. And using LinkedIn, I mean, it's been phenomenal for me to reach out to those leaders directly and say, "Hey, can you share a thought or two?" And so as I looked at that information, as these thought leaders spoke to me directly or through, whatever medium they were discussing, that wound up taking shape. I really allowed it the space that it needed to shape us. Now, that's not everything that was said, obviously, but I was very open, whereas my team was gathering a lot of technical information. I was gathering, I'd say, more of the, the business fundamentals and what have you, and just constantly reading, constantly talking to the leaders out there, excuse me, and being open. My thought was, what if we're doing something wrong? How can we not what we propose as a product and service, as a piece of SaaS, but a process that we're doing within that, bringing something like that to market? What if we're doing something wrong? And so that made me look at what other people were saying and doing and just make some comparisons. So it's been phenomenal to have business media, business conversations, books, and people available. And I'm not always available. I say available. I really mean, you might have to, kind of email them 2 or 3 times, but at some point you learn something. And that's been phenomenal. I've just been a sponge for that. But knowing where their experience ends and our identity and experience begins, very key. But just really allowing other thought leaders and business leaders to, help us to navigate, help us to navigate.
Absolutely. And I love that because that's so powerful. I think every great innovator really understands that you have to be a student of the business, right? We have to learn from not just our past, but also from others' experiences and how do we leverage that. And I think when I look at the work that you're driving at Raster, it's clear. I mean, you've taken the security experience and then you've also sought out financial experts and you sought out other, the artistic side as well to make sure their
Right.
needs are being met. And it is pretty amazing. And again, I got the good fortune, right, of seeing the demo that you shared. So I think for our audience, it's just so important to recognize like this really is I would say almost a creating a more useful ecosystem that connects the front end all the way through to the back end and everywhere in between.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing that is really key there is relationships. So as I mentioned, going to people and listening to what they have to say, but also letting people know, look, we need relationships. We need people who have more throughput than we have. And so that's another part of really bringing the back end to the front end, that back office. How do we get the Mattels, the Hasbros, the Netflix to look at what these creators are doing? It's all about those relationships. It's all about finding the right representative from those organizations, creating that proper visual narrative. Excuse me, never promising anything that you can't deliver. And, really also letting them, chime in, because a lot of times with your brand partners, they're on the outside looking in and they can help you to straighten things up as well. So it's been an organic process. And I want to add just one more thing to that. What has also made me more sensitive about it? Some time ago, I don't remember the year, but of course, when the startup environment was hot, there was a statistic or some information about how the entrepreneurs did not properly transcend from that inventor creator space to the consummate CEO. That some organizations really needed to have the creators as owners and to share the vision, but to have men and women who understood how to, at the executive level, take care of business. And I thought about that and I said, well, you've got choices. There are choices. It's not you have to become a better executive or an executive at all. I haven't seen myself not running my company.
Right.
I can see other people running it too, but I see myself running it. And so that meant that I would need to become a better CEO. And in the areas that I could teach my other executives and team members to become executives, to do that. So that's been the evolution. It's understanding when you're a creator, and again, when there's business that needs to be taken care of in a different way. And this is the same thing that we propose to our customers, to the artists out there, right? So for us, we need to have our paradigm down. And I think it's totally okay if there were, and I'm sure there's somebody, I really don't think so, but I'm sure there's somebody that would make a good CEO for Rastr. I make the best CEO for Rastr because nobody knows it like I do, right? And, you know, every area that I've seen that could help the team around the table transition to that executive, to the management, I shared that with my team. We always have information shared. In our end of the year meeting for 2025, one of the things that was the discussion was about, if you will, I guess the layman's terms become more presidential, right? Hey, we've got to remember that there's an executive aspect, there's an executive management aspect to our organization, not just, wow, we can, create this feature or we can, have this type of business relationship, but how do we make the business ends meet? And so really teaching my team and getting them thinking about the numbers, the KPIs, the OKRs, right? Really starting to tell their picture, their new picture in numbers, as opposed to just diagrams, tell it in numbers, here are the numbers that we're after, and here's the reasons why, and here's where we are so far. And they're really receptive. I've got a great team that understands how to grow. So that's been another reason. Those are the reasons I would say that we've transitioned from the creative side to the business side.
And I can't emphasize enough how powerful what you just said is, because that's exactly what so many early startups fail, right? You get the founder's
Yes.
trap, where the
Yes.
founders don't really embrace the power of we, right? They try to do it all themselves, but you actually built the team around, and not just the team, but also help with the skills. Like you said, it is about some of
Correct.
the business numbers. It is about, yes, we want to keep the creativity, but we still need to run a business. We still have to make money.
Absolutely.
And I think that is one of the most difficult turns for any organization to make, especially coming from that creative side into then now we've got to run it.
Absolutely. There's very little difference from the creatives in software code and the creatives that are doing comic books, animation, games, with hospital. Very little. They're all technical, but they have these visions of what they can create with their skills. The thing is understanding that the business is always that vehicle that gets what they create with those skills into the public and into the places it needs to be to provide the most value and utility possible. And that's important for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it really highlights the power of we, right? Because
Yes,
it takes a team to be able to do that and really convert, especially from this creativity of the artwork all the way to, okay, here's how we're going to run a business.
absolutely. Absolutely. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? So,
Exactly.
yes.
Well, I have to admit, Dion, this is it's always such a pleasure to talk with you as well, because I think you always have such great insights. And to me, one of the things I love talking with you, especially your journey, is you've actually done this. You've lived through the trenches. There's only a few of us, right? That when you think
Yeah.
about that have gone through these journeys, I think it's important to create that community where we help share. And I think having you on this show just makes it so fantastic. Folks being able to learn from your insights.
Well, I thank you for having me, John. We've had a number of conversations, and you are brilliant in your approach to business, your approach to people and relationships. It is inspiring. And, it should never be compared or taken for granted, because I think that you're dynamic. And, so there was, obviously, for context, there was, another podcast that I was due to be on this morning. There was a hit and miss there. And, I thought about the relationship there, saying, hey, look, I really want to show you what we're doing before I get on there. And knowing that you and I have gone through that process and have talked, you've allowed me to talk a lot. You know, there's something special about that. And I try not to waste your time. And you've been really instrumental and motivational in seeing and then saying, look, we can look at things in different ways. So that's been being objective and bringing other perspectives. That's been very good. And of course, you and I met on also on the premise too that we're both book writers. So, you beat me to the punch, but that's, we come from, being out in the trenches with the soldiers, and, so yeah, yeah, it's been awesome.
Thank you so much for those kind words. No, I'm really excited about your venture. Really excited for your book to come out too. I think for our listeners, they're going to just love your perspective.
Thank you.
You're a very humble person. You've done a lot of great things,
But
and
nobody's looking.
but thank you so much. Is there any last thing you'd like to say to the audience before we sign off for the day?
Yes, I would just say that if first, if you are thinking in your mind of taking the leap into business, do it. Win, lose, or draw, do it. You're going to build a little bit more hardness than you had before. You're going to build a little bit more mental capacity than you had before. You're going to build a team and a network even that you didn't have before. Win, lose, or draw. The other thing I would say is, if you're a creator listening to this, if you're an independent artist listening to this, is the environment you're in. It is so important to see the future of what the resources are and where the market is going, not just the sale of the product, but the entire scope of business around it. You're going to either embrace these technologies or get left behind. And a lot of you are going to use these technologies, whether or not you agree to, because they're going to be so embedded, and a lot of them already are, in a lot of the tools that you use. Get with your tribe, find your tribe, and promote within. The peer collaboration environment is extremely powerful in the indie creator environment. And I don't care if you're a group of moms making bake oven baking, oven mitts, you know what I mean, for baking. It doesn't matter. Find your tribe, work with your group. You have unique skills to help promote, handle the reciprocity is important. So those are the things that I would say, and continue to watch John's podcast.
Thank you. So always such a pleasure, Dionne. You bring such a wealth of knowledge, and really appreciate you sharing your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.